a very difficult time for the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office family. I want to say thank you to all those that showed their support to Sergeant Wilson's family and showed their support to his brothers and sisters here at the Sheriff's Office. I want to thank all the family and friends and dignitaries for coming out here today to celebrate the life of Sergeant Mike Wilson. As I look around here today, I see not only is the brotherhood among all law enforcement members is as strong as ever, but that of all first responders. James 4:14 states that life is a vapor that appears for a little while, then vanishes. Although Mike's life was cut short, he gave his life doing what he loved. Law enforcement was in his blood, and he gave the ultimate sacrifice while serving the community in which he was raised. I am proud of the courage that Sergeant Wilson displayed in carrying out his duties. His sacrifice saved lives, and today we honor him with the highest homage and respect. But not only was Mike a deputy sheriff, but he was a beloved husband to Joanne and a beloved father to Emily, Tyler, and Brandon. As with Mike, each of you are always be a part of the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office family. My heart goes out to each one of you. Mike touched many a person, not only in the Sheriff's Office, but in Charlotte County. He was unique, one of a kind. He was someone who loved to laugh and play jokes, and you knew he was up to something when you saw that certain smirk on his face. While this is certainly true, his commitment to law enforcement and the community was unwavering. It is a commitment shared by many first responders here today, a commitment to a life of service, a commitment to answer the call for help regardless of the danger, and a commitment to sacrifice to protect others. Mike made the ultimate sacrifice to keep this commitment. God bless each of you, and God bless all our brothers and sisters. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Matthew 5:9. Mike, you now sit beside him. We will never forget. We love you, brother.
It is with a heavy heart that we meet today. Sergeant Michael Wilson made the ultimate sacrifice in the name of public service. As a 21-year veteran of the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, Sergeant Wilson was committed to keeping families safe. Sergeant Wilson was a defender of his community, and his service will never be forgotten. Families in Charlotte County and across the state of Florida sleep safely because of heroes like Sergeant Wilson. A few nights ago, I was at the Florida Sheriff's Association conference in Southwest Florida, and everyone in the room expressed their condolences for Sergeant Wilson. To Sergeant Wilson's wife, Joanne, and the 3 children, Brandon, Tyler, and Emily, Attorney General Pam Bondi, my wife Ann, and I will all keep you in our prayers forever. Sergeant Wilson will never be forgotten. Joanne, Brandon, Tyler, and Emily, and the entire Wilson family, God bless each of you, and bless every law enforcement officer across the great state of Florida.
Morning, everybody. Let me tell you something about Mike. About 5 or 6 years ago, I announced I was running for sheriff, Charlotte County, and Mike jumped right up and said, I want to help. So one Sunday, several of us got together at my house, and we were working on getting signs and stuff ready, you know, campaign stuff. Mike wasn't there. Unbeknownst to us, Mike was at home, and he was doing his own thing. So we had been working all day on stuff. We're all sweaty, and we're getting ready to leave. And it was me and Les and Mike at my house, and Les's phone rings. And it was Mike. And he was all proud, telling Les, you ought to see what I just did. I built this big sign for the back of my pickup truck. We've got Cameron for sheriff signs stuck on the side, and I got this big A-frame. And if you know Mike, everything was over the top. This was no exception. So Mike was all excited, and Les says, what? We're at Bill's house right now. Come on over and show us. And Mike went, no, I can't come over. No, I can't. He didn't even know who I am. I said, get over here. Show us the truck. We want to see the truck. So Mike drives all the way from Port Charlotte, pulls into my driveway, and here's this monstrosity of a sign that him and Brandon had spent all day building. And when I say monstrosity, it was a monstrosity. I mean, he must have spent $1,000 in lumber, had A-frame twice. And he was so proud of this thing, and it looked so cool. It really did. And I was like, oh, Mike, this is so cool. Thank you so much. I mean, that is great. He goes, well, I'm riding around my lawn business. I'm going to have the signs in the back of the truck. Everybody's going to see this. And I'm saying, that is wonderful, wonderful. Brandon was a little guy. And they left. Not 7 minutes later, the phone rings. Les, hey, Mike. It's gone. Les goes, what? The sign, it's gone. He goes, what do you mean it's gone? You just left here. He goes, I know, but we got home and it's not in the back of the truck. He said, well, what are you talking? Well, which way did you drive? He goes, it must have blown out somewhere along the line. So he said, okay, well, you drive south and we'll drive north the same path and we'll see if we can find it somewhere. And Les was going, you probably killed somebody with the sign. It probably blew out. You know, he did all this work, but he just never tied it to the truck. So we ended up meeting somewhere in the middle, and no sign anywhere to be found along the way. And I said, well, Mike, what could have happened? He goes, it must have been when it went over the bridge. Must have blown over, and it went over the bridge. And then Les goes, great, you killed a boater probably, as the fisherman down there. And Mike was he was like, and I know Joanne was mad because he spent all darn day building this stupid thing. And we just laughed our butts off. So somewhere in the bottom of the Peace River is this really cool sign that Mike built. It'll live on as a legacy to him forever. And I just wanted those of you that don't know the Mike we knew to know who he was. He was a riot. I mean, a guy that loves his job. Sheriff was correct. He was a law enforcement guy, thick and thin. He was a practical joker, and most of the time it was at Phil Sanger's expense. And one time Phil was very proud because he had helped some family through something. Mike knew about it. Mike was his sergeant. So Mike got this fake gift card for like Bob Evans or Perkins and put it in an envelope and put it in Phil's mailbox, supposedly from the family, saying, thank you for everything you did for me. So Phil proudly opened it up at roll call and said, see, this is what you get when you do a good job. And Mike just shook his head and goes, you sap, that's a fake. Phil ended up putting him on, what was it, Phil? Friend probation, like several times. Because he also put Phil's phone number on the for sale sign on the narcotics truck. You just never knew. And, you know, yesterday I was sitting here and I was watching the slideshow of Mike, and the one common theme you see in every picture is that smile, the Mike smile. But that smile is the I just did something to Phil Sanger, he doesn't know it yet smile. That smirk right there. He was doing it to everybody at any given chance he could. When I took over as sheriff, you know, I wanted to put together a street crimes unit of really good, hard-working, aggressive cops to just combat street-level crimes and street-level drugs. And I didn't have to look far for my first supervisor. I picked Mike instantly. But I'll tell you, putting Mike in charge of a team like that is like letting a 5-year-old free in Toys R Us and saying, do what you want. And he did. He was so creative at what he did and chased down everybody and put more drug dealers in jail and more criminals in jail than you can shake a stick at. And he taught his team a lot. Last night we were talking at my house and sharing a lot of memories of Mike. And A-Rod was sharing the story that they were coming in one day and Mike said, we're going to go work the beach today and we're going to try and get some dopers that are working the beach. So come in plain clothes, and we're going to go and we're going to hang out at the beach, and you need to blend in. So A-Rod goes, okay. So A-Rod goes up and gets some drinks, and he walks down like he's going to the beach, and he left Mike alone, which is a mistake, for a few minutes. And A-Rod said, and I came back, and Mike had dug a hole deep enough for his whole body to get in. And when I came back, all I could see was his eyes looking over the hole in the sand, watching for dopers. And I said, did it work? And he goes, yeah, we actually invested a lot of guys for marijuana that day. And that was Mike. That was our Mike. I like to back him up on the street when I was out at night at a meeting or whatnot, and I would be coming back. I'd hear Mike and his squad on the radio at street crimes. And one that sticks in my mind. I was backing him up on a call. He was the only one that made this traffic stop. This guy rolled a stop sign in the middle of Port Charlotte. And when Mike walked up to the guy got out of the car, and he had been fiddling with something. So Mike was on his guard, and when he was fiddling with something, when the guy stepped out, a young guy, 20 years old, stepped out, turned to face Mike. Mike looked at his pocket, and hanging out of his pocket was a half a bag of marijuana. And Mike looked at it, and that's what the guy was trying to hide from Mike. He just wasn't very good at it. So Mike said, what's that hanging out of your pocket? The kid looked down, and he went, oh, marijuana. So Mike goes, well, you know, I have to arrest you. He goes, yeah, I know. So as Mike walked up to arrest him, the kid had his windows down in his car, and in the back seat of the car was one of these trays that you buy at Walmart with all the tomato plants in it. It was full of plants, but it wasn't tomato plants. And Mike just happened to look in the window. And he said to the kid, what's that plants? And the kid goes, oh, marijuana. And he goes, those are all marijuana plants? And the kid says, yeah. He goes, why are they in the backseat of your car? And he said, well, you actually just stopped me on the way from my friend's house to my house. I was moving the plants. Mike said, oh. And he waited a second, and he goes, why didn't you put it in the trunk? The kid goes, I didn't think of that. So he went to jail for cultivating marijuana, too. He was something else. Aaron Doyle is Aaron Doyle here? Because Aaron had a story, A-Rod told me last night, that we had a park that was known for kind of male prostitution and activities. So he told Aaron, you're coming in plain clothes tomorrow, and you're going to be the decoy. So Aaron said, okay. So Aaron came to work in his jeans and his t-shirt, ready to go work as a decoy. Mike said, those jeans aren't going to work. And he took out the scissors, and he cut the legs off of Aaron's pants till they were like 50s hot pants, with Aaron's chubby little butt hanging out the bottom. He says, now you're going to go pick up people. I'll tell you one thing, Mike, as a street crimes guy, as a road officer, you always knew, and a road supervisor, you always knew when Mike's squad was on duty. Always. Because the radio was constantly going. They were constantly doing things. They were constantly pulling cars over. And Mike was constantly on the radio. Dispatchers, Mike was constantly on the radio. So I called him one day because everybody was tired of Mike constantly being on the radio. So I called him as a sheriff, and I said, hey, Mike, let me tell you something, buddy. When your shift is on, I know it. I listen. Your guys are out there stopping cars. You're getting arrests. You're doing all the right things. I hear your guys all the time on the radio. And he said, and I hear you all the time, constantly on the radio. And he said, thank you, Sheriff. And I said, that wasn't a compliment. He said, what? I said, you got to shut up. You're driving everybody crazy. And I said, you talk so much. And I said, it got to the point where the dispatchers aren't dispatching your guys to calls anymore. They're just calling you and say, all right, what do you want them to do? Because no matter what the dispatchers told them to do, Mike would tell them to do something different and change it. He was just so active, is the best word. He was active, all the time. And he didn't have an off button. We were talking last night about, Mike's a 20-year veteran. But you wouldn't know it. Because most of the time, us old guys, we slow down. We've been in the business a long time. One of my good friends from Lee County he had told me the story the other day. He said, Billy, remember back when we were young? He said, remember the old Lethal Weapon movies? Some of you may be too young, but the Lethal Weapon movies, Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, right? Riggs and Murtaugh. He said, remember when we were Riggs? Go, 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 go. He says, now we're Murtaugh. Now we get out of the car, it's like, oh, this hurts, oh, that hurts. Oh, you go chase him, I'll catch up to you. Mike was never going to be Murtaugh. Mike was going to be Riggs. I don't care if he was 60 years old, Mike was going to be Riggs. And he was just going to go and go and go. I got one complaint on Mike as a sheriff. Lady called up one day. She was a local drug dealer. Mike's job was to chase down local drug dealers. And Mike knew her. And she finally got tired of Mike's attention. And Mike pulled her over one day, and they had a little talk. And she was angry with Mike because why are you always stopping me? Why are you always at my house? Why are you always doing this? And he said, because you deal drugs. So we're going to be good friends. And she says, well, how do I get you to stop that? He said, get out of town, move. So this lady called up a complaint, and she said, one of your sergeants told me that I should get out of town. So when the staff came to me and said, this lady called a complaint on Mike, told her to get out of town, I go, she did? Who is this lady? Well, she's one of our local drug dealers, and she's got a drug house. And I said, then it sounds like Mike gave her good advice. So what's the issue? And said, well, we're just telling you she called. So I got right in the phone to Mike, and I said, Mike, did you tell this lady to get out of town? He said, yes, sir, I did. I told her that if she wanted to live free and quiet, get out of town, because she was... And I said, I want you to go by her house right now and knock on her door. And I want you to tell her that Sheriff Cameron just made you her personal deputy. And Mike says, I can do that. And he went over there, and I don't think we ever heard from that woman again. I'm going to miss... I love all the cops. I love everybody. I've worked with a lot of guys in 30 years. But there was something about him. He was just special. He was just a riot. He would never think twice about going on a call. He would never think twice about jumping a call for somebody else. That was his nature. That's what Mike did. That's what he did Monday night. He took the call. He loved protecting people, and I know that's what he thought he was doing. And he was. He saved lives that night. He gave his, but he saved lives. I know for certain when Mike got to heaven, God hugged him. And he said, Mike, you did good. I just hope there's no police radios in heaven, because he's going to drive the angels crazy. That's the Mike you all needed to know. Right, Joanne? He wasn't perfect, but he was fun. Thank you.
Good morning. Sergeant Christopher Williams of the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. Behind me are not only Mike's partners, but his squad, also known as the Nightcrawlers. I'll give you a little history on the Nightcrawlers here in a moment. As stated, Mike was a unique individual, very unique. However, he loved his job, and this past Monday, August 5th, 2013, he showed that. Mike was on a traffic stop just outside the location where the disturbance took place. Could he have stayed on that traffic stop? Absolutely. That's not Mike. Mike, knowing a physical altercation was taking place inside that apartment complex, what did he do? Everything he's done in the last 21 years. He immediately cleared that traffic stop and did his job. And what's his job? We all know it. We all do it. Protect human life. Mike entered that day not knowing what was going to happen to him in the end. But as his squad, the night crawlers, we're very proud of our hero, our brother that was there with us every night for the last 8 months, and we thank him for that. In regards to the night crawlers, a little special note here from one of our newer deputies, Deputy Robert Tuck. In February 2013, I, Deputy Tuck, officially began my tour of duty and went in service for the first time. A sense of accomplishment and excited to protect and serve my community are just some of the emotions that flooded his mind. That night, I walked into the doors of District 4 thinking, God, don't wake me from this. I'm living my dream. And then he was warmly greeted by his new family, his new brothers and sisters, his new squad, his new team, the night crawlers. He sat down in his chair with a notepad and pen, excited to debrief on last shift's events. This is when his new corporal, Brother Mikey, turned around and asked him a question that for as long as he lived, he will never forget. Mike said, "Welcome to our squad. I know you are completely new to this, but tonight I have one question of you." He looked at Mike, and Mike said, "Do you know what a night crawler is?" He looked back at him puzzled and laughed as he thought to himself, Deputy Tuck. But before I could reply, Mike said, "Don't try to answer it till you have a couple months under your belt." That's Mike. As weeks turned into months, Deputy Tuck truly thought he had a clue. One day, he pulled Mike aside and said, "I think I can finally answer for you. A night crawler is us. We show up to work every night without fail. We respond to calls for service, preserve life, which Mike did, and take the bad guys to jail." Mike replied, "Though you're on the right track, you're just not quite there." Probably had a little smirk on his face. "But don't worry, Tuck. It took me 21 years to answer. You'll get there, I swear." On the evening of August 5th, it became painfully obvious to Deputy Tuck. There was so much meaning behind the word that Mike used, so much more than just a man in green. A night crawler is a warrior, just like Brother Mike. A man that's not afraid to face his darkest fears. A man that has seen things some can't even imagine, but waits to get home before he can shed his tears. A night crawler sees someone in need and never even thinks twice. Place himself in the line of fire so that he can save a complete stranger's life. A night crawler doesn't act heroic for the glamour, nor does this asset fade as he gets older. God created different people in different ways. In Mike, God created a soldier. But if there's one thing I've learned about a night crawler, just one thing alone, is that the hero you portray at work does not end once you get home. A night crawler puts his family first, no matter the cost, whatever it is. A night crawler comes into work every night, just like Mikey did, though he never stops talking about his kids. Though a night crawler loves his job, there's a side most never get to see. He loves his family so much, I know home is where he would rather be. A night crawler is one of a kind. Some would even say a special breed, and we know Mikey was. The kind where his desire to give to others far outweighs his own needs. A Nightcrawler is a true friend, one that's loyal, one that's true. I pray to God every day, says Robbie Mike, that I will be a Nightcrawler just like you. Over the last 8 months, I've been exposed to some of Mike's experience in regards to his love for this profession. And Mike would do anything possible to take someone to jail. Anything possible. You've heard it. He loved his job, 21 years, and still going at it. Outstanding. One night, I get a phone call saying there's a lady that has a warrant. And I'm thinking, okay, where's this going? Mike says, I got information we've been looking for, and I know where she's at. I said, okay, well, whatever we need to do. Let's get the Nightcrawlers together and let's go track her down. So we do. We find a location, go up to the house, Mike and another deputy. As he goes to the front door, he's looking through the open window. There she is inside the house. Okay, Mike, he says, tells this deputy next to him, this is what I want you to do. When I say go, take your flashlight, shine it through that window. Okay, I got it. I'm ready to go. All right, go. Boom, shines the light. SWAT team, come to the door. We have a warrant. Oh, my goodness gracious, what are we doing? SWAT team, come to the door. I didn't know Mike was a self-proclaimed SWAT team member. He was that evening. Banging on the door, the flashlight's on. I hear, deploy bang, deploy bang. Okay, deploy bang. Next thing you know, the door opens, and there she is. We've had difficulty finding this female for a long time. Mike's way of doing things were a little unique, obviously, but he got the job done. Okay? And his goal was to serve his community that he lived in, that he's been raised in, and he did an outstanding job. Mike had a sensitive side of him, too. Probably didn't know that unless you're really close to him. Phone calls, you talk to him, he loved to talk. If he wasn't talking, not just the radio, Sheriff. Also on the phone, he'll be texting you. One day on the phone, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Nightcrawlers, we go in at 6. Talking to Mike about work, what we're going to do the oncoming shift, some things he had in mind, and next thing you know, he says, I got to go. Mike, where are you going? We're talking on the phone. It's like, my family just prepared my bubble bath. Your bubble bath? He said, yes, my family prepares my bubble bath the same time every night before I go to work. I said, Mike, have a great bath. Enjoy your candles. Monday night was very, very difficult for all of us, obviously. Very tough night. As their sergeant, I want to personally thank them all. They were great. These guys here, plus the support that came afterwards, to include our dispatchers, did a phenomenal job. Gentlemen, thank you. It's such an honor to work with such a great group to make my job a lot easier. On behalf of us, on behalf of Brother Mikey, we'd like to thank everybody for coming today to show their support and tribute to such a great man, a great father, a great friend, brother, and police officer. In closing, I want to say that Mike would be proud to know of all the love and support he and his family has received. Thank you. Please understand that on Monday night, Mike did not die alone, because his friends, his brothers, were by his side to protect and comfort him through his new transition to heaven. I feel he was at peace to know his brothers rendered the aid he needed. And I know through his character and personality that he would have said, Nightcrawlers, you did your best. Mike, our brother, you will be greatly missed. We love you, and you will never be forgotten. Thank you, and God bless.
Together we're here to celebrate the life of Sergeant Mike Wilson. As you guys heard, most of us would refer to Mike as Mike. It wasn't Michael, it was Mike. I've had the fortunate opportunity to know Mike for a very long time. I first met Mike about 23 years ago while we were students at Port Charlotte High School. Mike had a lowered truck. If you guys went, there's a lot of people who went to school with us. Mike had his little lowrider truck, fit his personality, had a whole bunch of triangles and squares on it, had the biggest bass system that you would imagine. If Mike had his truck outside right now, the walls would be shaking inside here. Mike loved that truck. I remember talking, Mr. Duffy had an article in the paper the other day about an alarm system. Mike Wilson loved gadgets. He had an alarm system in his truck when it was parked at the school that if you got within 10 feet of it, it would start talking to you. And it would say, Viper alarm, you've gotten too close to the perimeter of this vehicle, the alarm will go off in 10 seconds. And it would start counting down, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Well, it was great because all of us in school that knew Mike, we go stand by his truck. Because Mike had a little pager system that he had in the classroom with him. So as we stood by the truck and the alarm would go off, his pager would start going inside the classroom. Mike would look at his pager, he'd look up, look at the teacher, and he's like, my alarm's going off. And back then, pagers weren't really a big thing. We didn't have a lot of pagers. And the teacher's like, well, what are you talking about? He goes, someone's messing with my truck. He'd jump out and run out of the classroom. Teacher wouldn't see him again. So, Mr. Duffy, if you're out there, I was probably responsible for about 12 of those alarms when you had meetings with Mike. So, we had a good time with that. Mike graduated in 1990. I graduated in 1991. And as with everybody, I lost a little bit of contact with Mike for a couple of years. I see him around town. We say a quick hello, ask how we're doing, and we move on our way. One night I was going out with a group of my friends. We were heading up to a club in Sarasota. There's Mike. I'm like, wow, I haven't seen you in a while, Mike. How it's going? I'll remember this day for my whole life. Mike had this shirt on, and the pictures that were playing earlier, you saw that shirt. He looked like a fruit-flavored Lifesaver pack. The shirt was so bright, had so many different colors. I'm like, Mike, what are you doing? Everybody's going to see you. And Mike goes, I like this shirt. And I was talking to Joanne the other day about it, and I said, you remember that shirt? She goes, yeah, I do remember that shirt. She goes, one of the first pictures I pulled up was Mike in that shirt. And for the longest time, I'd always ask Mike when I saw him, I'm like, hey, where's your fruit-flavored Lifesaver shirt? He goes, oh, I still got it. It's in my closet. I wear it all the time. I'm not sure. It might still be in his closet. I don't know. He loved that shirt. And Joanne said to me, she goes, Mike really loved that shirt. He loved the bright colors. Because Mike always saw things to the brightest potential. And that was Mike. If you met Mike, Mike always saw things to the best that they could be. I remember asking Mike that night what he was currently doing. And he got that grin on his face. And you've all heard the grin, the smirk, called different things. I was standing back. I'm like, here it comes. It's either going to be good or it's going to be bad. It was a good grin. He opened up his wallet, and inside of his wallet was a gold shiny badge. And Mike goes, I work at the sheriff's office. He goes, I'm in corrections. He goes, it's the greatest thing. And that he just loved being a deputy. I was like, that's cool. That's what I want to be. And Mike gave me some advice on how to get to the sheriff's office, how to get involved. And he helped me out to get my step here. Later that night, while we were in the club, Mike and I were speaking again about what's going on. And he starts telling me about this girl he met. I'm like, oh, you met a girl? He goes, oh, she's beautiful. I said, well, where'd you meet her at? He goes, I met her at Port Charlotte Beach. I'm like, you met a good-looking girl at Port Charlotte Beach. If you guys aren't familiar with Port Charlotte Beach, it's pretty much the county came in with a whole bunch of sand, and they dumped it on a whole bunch of rocks, and they call it a beach. So I'm like, Mike, how did you? He goes, well, I was jet skiing, and there was this girl with her friend, and I met her, and I said, so you met a good-looking girl at Port Charlotte Beach? I said, I just don't see how that happens. I've been here a long time. There's not. He goes, well, she's from Canada. So I said, well, that might explain it a little bit. I said, she probably doesn't know about the beach. So Mike was so happy from the day one that he met you, Joanne. I think he knew that you were the one. I started the sheriff's office in 1995. I was assigned to District 2, Road Patrol. Mike was transferred out of the jail, I think, about a couple of weeks before I was. I started my field training, and I worked with Mike for the next 2 years on Road Patrol. We worked night shift. You had the night crawlers talk earlier. Mike loved night shift. I love night shift. I think it's the best shift that you can hear work at the sheriff's office. Mike was great for pulling pranks. You guys have heard that. And Mike being Mike, Mike would try to push you a little bit to see how far he could go. So Mike would meet up with me at night, and we'd have our cars parked. We called it, and his car would be parked where we can talk out of our windows. And Mike was eating these little RB cheese ball things that he would get. And he started throwing them in my car. Well, they'd stick to the windshield, and they'd start traveling down my car. I'm looking at him, I go, Mike, you do it again, I'm going to pepper spray you. So now here comes that other grin that he gets. He gets that grin, looks at me, throws another one on my windshield. I said, all right, took out my pepper spray, and I pepper sprayed Mike Wilson that night. To this day, the only person I've ever sprayed with my pepper spray is Mike Wilson. So as good as Mike is about pranks, I'm like, I'm going to get him back one day. So I went to his car, I took my pepper spray out again, and I pepper sprayed his driver's side mirror. If you guys knew Mike liked to drive with his window down, and he put his hand on his mirror like this. So about an hour later, Mike calls me up in a little bit of a panic. He's like, hey, meet up with me. I'm like, all right, I'll meet up with you. And I pull up to him, and his eyes are watering, and his nose is running a little bit. And he's starting to panic. He's like, I got into something. I'm allergic. I don't know what's going on. I need some help. Most of you guys know me. I'm pretty good. I can keep a prank going. I couldn't do it that day. I looked at him and said, Mike, I pepper sprayed your rearview mirror. He said, you did what? He goes, he's got that smile, and he goes, that was good. Mike was also one of the most organized people that you'll ever meet. Mike had a metal citation holder for about everything that you could write. He had like 10 of them in his car. They were organized in his front seat. He had a plastic folder box for all the paper forms we used to have, and everything was organized perfectly. We used to just go in his trunk and start messing things around because that would get Mike upset when you messed with all of his organization that he had. He actually had a little paper calendar, and he would have inside his details that he worked. And inside, he'd highlight each different detail with a dollar amount that he was going to make on that detail. He knew exactly, he could tell you what his paycheck was going to be 4 weeks in advance. He goes, I know on this day, this is what I'm going to make. Mike also had one of the first computers in his car. It wasn't a computer issued by the sheriff's office. It was Mike's own personal computer. He mounted it in his car. And then he had a printer in there as well. And he would go in there and he'd do our reports. And if you meet up with him, he's like, John, what do you got? I'll type it up for you. So he'd get in there, he'd type it up, he'd print it out. Printer went from the front seat to the back seat. He moved things all around in his car. Mike loved his gadgets. He was always around there. Mike loved to work traffic. Sheriff Cameron mentioned a little bit, street crimes. He did a lot of traffic over there. He normally had the highest activity in our squad. There's a lot of our old squad members here today. He'd start pulling over kids for having that loud radio system. And I pull up next to him, like, Mike, your system was a lot louder. He goes, yeah, I know. He goes, I'm pulling them over to compare what they had to what I used to have. I'm like, all right, that makes sense. I was good with that. So our careers did lead us down different paths over the course of the years. I again got a chance to see Mike on a regular basis. I was in K-9. He became an SRO. He was at Port Charlotte High School. I kind of wondered. I sat back and I said, how is Mike Wilson even allowed back at Port Charlotte High School? There's a lot of things that we did in high school that I can't even still talk about, so I don't know how he got back into the school. Mike loved the kids at the school. Mike did an awesome job at the school. It was easy for Mike. Mike was a kid himself. Even till up to his end, Mike was a kid. He enjoyed life and he had a good time doing everything that he did. I was lucky to have a chance to work with him on a regular basis during my whole career at the sheriff's office. We get a chance to sit down, we talk a little bit about everything. I'd ask Mike about his family, and he'd get that good grin on his face again. Mike loved his family. He'd start telling me everything that was going on with Joanne, everything that was going on with the kids, and Mike would just tell me everything that was going on. I remember the first house you guys had on Conway that you guys started your family in. Mike put a lot of work in that house. If you guys didn't know, it was one of these old general development houses, kind of falling apart. Mike and Joanne did a great job putting that house together for the family to start off with. The grass was always green, the trees and bushes well manicured. Mike wanted his kids to grow up in a perfect home. He did that. He succeeded. They added on to their house as the family grew, and eventually they moved on to a bigger house, a nicer house. If you go to their house right now, it's perfectly manicured. The house looks like it's brand new. It was built years ago, but it looks just like it was pristine and it was built yesterday. Joanne and I talked. We're pretty sure Mike had a little bit of touch of OCD when it came to being neat, clean, and organized. He probably had ADHD as well. We didn't get diagnosed back then when we were in school. Mike was a worker who always wanted to supply for his family. He'd work the details and still find time to spend with his family. Mike was always working. If it wasn't a detail, he was working on the road or he spending time with his family. Mike decided that wasn't enough, so he started his own business. He started his lawn business. He'd finish up his shift, and the next day he'd be on a mower. Brandon began to mow with him. remember Mike telling me one day, he goes, Brandon, he's such a hard worker. He says he saved up all of his money. He has this nice new truck. I'm like, Mike, doesn't have his license. He goes, yeah, I know. He goes, and I'm kind of upset that his truck's nicer than any other vehicle I have. That was Mike, though. Mike was very proud of you. Mike always found time for his family, fishing, camping, four-wheeling, or just relaxing for the day with the family. Mike was a family man. Mike was also a great friend. If you needed something, Mike would be the first to help you. I had asked for Mike's help a few times, and unlike other people, he wouldn't come up with an excuse. He'd just ask you, what do you need? And when you told him what you needed, Mike would be there to help you out with it. Mike left us doing what he loved to do. He loved being a cop. Right out of high school, he got in that career, and he loved doing it. He loved to protect the public by providing for his family. Mike faced the dangers that night to protect someone he never met, and in the end paid the ultimate sacrifice. Mike Wilson most likely saved the lives of his squad members that night and other people. Mike Wilson did die a hero, and we should remember Mike for all the good he did for us. Today we celebrate his life and how he touched each and every one of us in this county. Mike, I know when I make it to the other side, my friend, you're going to have that grin on your face, and I'm more likely it's going to be because you have a great prank ready for me. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Jill McBee. Not everyone you meet or everyone that you work with will necessarily be a blessing in your life. But for me, Mike will always be counted as a blessing. Mike and I went to high school together, along with many of you here today. We didn't hang out together then, but as adults, Mike loved to remind me of all the things about my adolescence that I would much rather forget. But I too have a good memory and would quickly remind him of his own wayward path. If you heard our banter back and forth, you would have thought we were the worst of enemies, but the reality was we were the best of friends. Over the past week, my family has reminisced about so many Mike stories. The first memory I have working with Mike is from 1996. We were on the parking lot of District 2, and he was dispatched to an accident on Raintree. This was before the age of GPS and in-car mapping systems. Our maps were paper. Mike looked through his trusty map book, and he could not find Raintree anywhere. He calls dispatch and asks them to spell it. No luck. He asks them to verify it. Yes, it's definitely Raintree. Now he starts getting upset, and he is yelling out the window at us. Does anybody know where Raintree is? Nope, no one's ever heard of it. Now he's just mad, and he throws his map book across the car. He's frustrated. And then dispatch comes across the radio and says 1066, disregard, it's in Northport. Then we were all laughing, even Mike. It was important to Mike, even then, that he respond to the needs of the community quickly and render aid. But he was also able to laugh at his own reactions. Mike and I had an opportunity to work together at our alma mater, Port Charlotte High School. When you work closely with someone, especially where trust is imperative, you get to that point where you can read each other well and finish each other's sentences. And like a mother, I usually would look at him and see that iconic grin and gleam in his eye and say, don't do it. And he usually would do it anyway. That was Mike. For those of you who didn't know him personally, he had a mischievous side, if you haven't figured that out, because he loved living life to the fullest and bringing everyone with him. My oldest son reminded me of the time I came out to my patrol car on the campus, and somehow Mike had entered it and scattered crushed potato chips inside of it. That was also Mike. I can tell you all personally that I've observed all three of his children at some point play pranks on some unwitting victim. They absolutely get that from Mike. As a school resource officer, I was in a position to observe Mike's compassion on a regular basis. He touched many lives and made many youth feel good about themselves when life didn't. Mike's life experience led him to be grateful and gave him an ability to connect in meaningful ways with the students. Mike often credited the unconditional love of his grandparents, Janet and Frank Wilson, a source of his motivation. It was extremely important to him that his family had reason to be proud of his service, and without question, they do. I remember when Mike studied for the corporal's exam. His goal wasn't to pass. There was no question about passing. It was to have the highest score. He made me quiz him practically every day, and he confided in me that he had taken the statute book and made a tape of all the statutes so he could listen to them at night while he slept. All I thought was, poor Joanne. Mike's biggest competitor was himself. He was self-motivated, driven, and his satisfaction came from the results of that determination. Although Mike took pride in his service, ultimately, it was his family he was proudest of. Mike's love for his family and the energy he devoted to them was unparalleled to anything I have ever seen. He would work a 12-hour shift, go home, and spend hours finishing some school project for the kids, taking Emily to dance, helping Tyler catch bigger and bigger fish, or teaching Brandon and his friends something new. He made sure his family never had a need for anything, not just materially. He saw the value in spending quality time with each of them individually and as a family. Whether he was talking about the big fish Tyler caught last night, or one of Emily's recitals, or Brandon's work ethic, he was beaming with pride when it came to his family. And although he served honorably, you didn't see that same pride over a traffic stop, an arrest, or even a rescue. A couple years back, Mike called me and he said, "Where are you?" I was like, "I'm in the Publix parking lot." "Why?" And he goes, "Stay right there, I'll be right there." I was like, "Okay, that's weird," but I waited. So he pulls up in this truck and he hops out with a grin and he says, "Look at Brandon's new truck." I said, "Wow, that's awesome." I said, "But you know, Mike, he doesn't have his license yet. He can't even drive." His response was, "I know, but he has worked so hard, and he is such a great kid." He was proud of the gifts and unique qualities each of his children possessed, and he knew that he and Joanne had done well. It was rewarding to lavish them with his love and kisses, as well as material things. He was always kissing those kids. He didn't care where they were. He would grab them, put them in a headlock, call them by their nicknames, and just start kissing them wherever he could plant them. When they were little, they would squirm a little bit, but eventually they learned it was much easier to go with it, even if it was in the parents' school drop-off line. Mike was always very proud of Joanne. He respected her nursing accomplishments, her abilities as a mother, and the support she gave him being the wife of a law enforcement officer. No easy challenge, and especially since this is Mike we're talking about. When Joanne took up biking, Mike bought a bike to join her. His was a special bike, though. His had a motor on it. Yes, a motor. He had to because that was the only way he could keep up with her. Joanne and Mike were a complete package. Romans chapter 10, verse 9, says that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God was raised from the dead, you will be saved. If you love your family and you love your friends, the most important discussion you can have with them is to ask them if they have God in their heart. You can never know what is truly inside someone's heart unless you ask them. In Christ, our death does not mean an end, but the beginning of our eternal life. I had this discussion with Mike about a year ago because it is important to me to know that my family and friends have the promise of eternal life. If you have any question about where Michael Lee Wilson walks today, I leave you with the following. We are instructed to use Christ as our example in life, and although we will all sin and fall short of the glory of God, I tell you that Mike's last act was an imitation of Christ. Matthew 20:28, Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Mike fearlessly gave his life to serve and protect others. We are not Christ. Sometimes we are not even Christ-like. But God seeks an imperfect people to impart his perfect love. I tell you today, Mike walks in God's perfect love eternally. May peace be with all of you.
You've heard a lot about how Mike Wilson was at work. I'm going to tell you about the real Mike Wilson. You see, Mike Wilson had a tendency to do crazy things at the most opportune times for other people. But he wore many different hats. He was a deputy. He was a lawn care owner. He was a friend. He was a father. He was a husband. But I want to let you know how good of a friend Mike was. I show you this tank top because Mike wore a green uniform at work, whether it was at night or day. But this was his uniform that I got to see him in the most. The tank top. Usually comes in 3 standard colors. His preference was green, but he also had blue and red. And he wore it in the heat of the day, usually mowing with Julio. And they would come by the house, and by the time they got to my house, Mike would look about 10 shades darker than probably the darkest person I've ever seen. And when he took his tank top off, he had a reverse tan. It was unbelievable. The tank top was perfectly green. I mean, it looked like it hadn't even been touched by dirt, but every other place on his body was black because of all the dust. When Mike told me he was going to open his lawn business, Joanne and my wife had been friends for a long time, and we had also been friends for a while. I said to him, Mike, where are you going to find the time? You love your family as much as you do. You do everything with them. You work a job that has crazy hours, 12-hour shifts. Sometimes it's during the day, sometimes it's at night. Where are you going to come up with enough time to go and mow these lawns? He said, Doug, don't worry. I'm only going to take a couple, just a few. Okay, that's fine. So I think after about a week or two, we had 12 or 15. I mean, right away. And I said one day, how's the business going? Well, you know, it's going pretty good, but I've got some more accounts. Well, how many do you have? I got 35. Whoa. 35? That's a lot, Mike. Yeah, but don't worry, you know, I'm getting them knocked out. Everything's fine. This is all for the family. I want to build something for Brandon and the family. I thought, okay, that's fine. It got to the point where Mike ended up with, I believe, 78 accounts that he did, all wearing this. Now, I know my buddy Beck is out there. Beck posted a video of when he moved a little while ago. And on that video, wouldn't you know, he's wearing this green tank top in an office chair in the back of a U-Haul with the ramp going down. That's the way he was, in that green tank top, flying down that ramp, crashing at the end. If you are a friend of Wilson's, just like the Sheriff's Department, when you go ride with the Sheriff's Department, you have to sign the liability waiver. When you were a friend of Mike Wilson's, you had to sign the Mike Wilson liability waiver. He was doing crazy things all the time, fireworks, whatever. But I'll remember one Memorial Day very, very vividly. Yep, it was right after Mike had bought his Cobia boat. We had found a tower. He had a tower built on the boat. He invited my wife and kids out to Kea Casa, and we were going to go out on the boat and have fun. Had all the picnic stuff, and we were going to have a blast. We head on out. We get out there to the beach and set up, and the girls and the kids, they're all talking and having fun, and we eat some lunch, and then Mike says, hey, let's go out and go fishing. We'll take the kids fishing, Doug. I said, okay, that's not a problem. My boys and his kids are sitting up in the front, and I decided that I wasn't going to sit in the seat next to him because the seats were really close to each other. I sat on the back transom of the boat, and it was pretty bumpy out that day. Let's just say that 45 minutes later, an hour later, I was sitting in the Peace River emergency room getting 4 staples in my head. And it wasn't his fault. That's what he said. You know,
I miss my buddy, I really do. We used to compare our belly sizes. He would always say, "Tucker, you're getting fat." And I'd always pat him on the belly and say, "I'm just trying to keep up with you." But we found this. If you haven't used these are the ultimate diet tool if you're a soda fan. Mike would drink soda like it was going out of style. And one day I said to him, "Hey, Mike, I found a way that you can drink water," because he wasn't really a big water drinker. I said, "I found a way you can drink water and you can put this stuff in it and it tastes just like an Arnold Palmer iced tea." And I gave him one. And next thing I know, I was over at his house one night and I walked in the kitchen and he had 200 of these boxes on the counter. I said to him, "Mike, there's 10 sticks in a box. There's 25 boxes in a case, and you've got 8 cases. What are you going to do with all these?" If you went in Mike's garage right now, how many has he got, Joanne? Maybe 100? 150? That was his one of his preferred drinks of choice. His real preferred drink of choice was this. If you worked with Mike, you knew he had to have his Diet Coke. Am I correct, gentlemen? And it wasn't one. It was usually a big one. Well, I got to tell you this Diet Coke story. I was riding on a ride-along with Mike, and we went through Chick-fil-A. And, of course, you know, he had his favorite places where he ate and his favorite things. Chick-fil-A was one of them. And we went through the drive-thru, and he ordered his meal, and I had eaten before I had gotten picked up, so I really wasn't hungry. And he says, no, you got to eat. It's half price. You got to eat. Come on. So, okay, Chick-fil-A, half price. Why not? So I ordered a lunch, and we went over in front of Moe's, and we were just scarfing it down. I mean, it was a really busy night. And before we got back out on the road, I mean, he drank that whole large Diet Coke. I mean, I had probably had 2 sips of mine. Next thing I know, we're back in the Chick-fil-A line. I'm like, "Mike, we just ate." He said, "I got to fill up. I got to fill up my Diet Coke." That's the way he was. The other thing he loved to eat, Sam Sub's fried cheesecake. If you went to Sam Sub's with Mike, you were very entertained because you usually got a small cup of soup and a big fried cheesecake. That was his meal. He loved that fried cheesecake. You know, I'm gonna close with this. In your life, you come across people that are acquaintances. I ran unsuccessfully for office in this county twice. I have a lot of acquaintances. You have special friends, people that touch you. That was this guy. Our wives love each other. I loved him. As my wife and I pulled into our driveway last night, she was in bed or getting ready to go to bed, and I said, "Amy, there's a cross in the front yard." I walked out there with a flashlight, scribbled in marker, in memory of Mike Wilson, a great friend. It was done by my sons last night. I will only remember Mike Wilson by one thing. To me, he was 400. The way he said it over the radio, I can't do it perfect, sorry. The way he said it over the radio was unbelievable, but I would always mess with him. Every time I saw him, how's 400 doing? 400 this, 400, 400, 400, 400. I believe that on Monday night, he made his last calls 400 in front of our Father, God. And he said 400 on scene.
Good morning. I was asked to say a few words about Mike going back to his early years on the sheriff's office. When I first became Mike's corporal, we had a love-hate relationship. I'd love to give him a hard time. And he'd hate getting caught trying to slip something by me. Mike was just telling me a couple weeks ago about all the antacids he would have to eat when he worked for me. He said I would stress him out so bad he would go home with indigestion. Well, that stress told me he worried. He worried about being the best. He tried harder than everyone to be the best officer on the street. I was trying to think of some light-hearted stories that I could share with everyone about the adventures that Mike and I had patrolling District 2 way back in our early years. Most of the ones that I remembered were about two young cops working the midnight shift, fighting off the Borden. District 2 wasn't that busy. I remember when Mike and I park our cars outside Riverwood, we'd sneak up on the security guard, Eddie. For those that ever worked with me know Eddie. And we'd give him a good scare. As I told my wife these stories last night, we determined that most of them would not be appropriate for my speech today. So I decided I would read a poem some of you have already read. It's written by Lieutenant Doan from the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office. It's called The Final Watch. The shots rang out in that empty hall. They echoed off each barren wall. Shots fired, I called out. My brother and sisters are on their way, no doubt. Then pain, anger, and disbelief. Come quickly, my brothers. I need some relief. It's way too soon. This can't be true. My job here is not through. Pain, Lord, why this pain? It's all I can do to just maintain. My guys are here now. I'll be okay. Quickly now, they will whisk me away. Why the confusion? I'm getting cold. Please take my hand and just hold. The pain is gone now and the sun has set. But why is everyone so upset? I hear people around me as they weep. I'm very tired now, and I want to sleep. Then a voice softly spoke. Michael, my son. And I gently awoke. Come with me, my son. Take my hand. Upon this earth, you'll no longer stand. You have finished your earthly chores. The kingdom of heaven is now yours. You have the heart of a servant and gave to others. Like many before you, both sisters and brothers. All of your imperfections have been forgiven. Your new home is now my castle in heaven. Walk with me and enjoy this view. You are a part of heaven, and now it is a part of you. Joanne, Brandon, Tyler, and Emily. Mike will always be my hero.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Pastor Rich Webb, pastor of Faith Life Church here in Port Charlotte, Florida. I want to begin this morning by, first of all, saying thank you to the family. I want to thank you, Joanne, Brandon, Tyler, and Emily, for sharing your husband with us. Sergeant Mike Wilson, in our community here in Charlotte County. The family this morning has asked me to bring some perspective to this man who wore a uniform and took an oath to protect and serve. And so I want to talk today for a few minutes about the man inside the uniform, the man behind the badge. Mike Wilson was a neighbor to all of us who live in Southwest Florida. Mike Wilson was a husband, a lover, and a friend to Joanne. Mike Wilson was a loving, proud father of Brandon, Emily, and Tyler. It is at times like this that we face certain realities in life. Times like these bring us to the base realities of life. Realities like we live in a community that can be both very safe and very dangerous. It is people in it that can do very good things, but it has people that can do evil things. Today we are reminded of the reality that life is precious, and it's a gift from God, and it can't be taken for granted. It must be cherished, because we realize today our life can change by one phone call, one knock on the door, one visit to the doctor. Days like this remind us that life is uncertain, and we should not take any of it for granted. But as we gather together here as a community, as law enforcement agencies, and as a family, I want us to think about a reality that we have seen in the last 5 days and heard in our community. And that reality is love is greater than evil. In times like this, it feels like evil wins. The Bible was written to remind us in times like these that love is greater than evil. I know today it might look like and feel like evil has won, but love is greater than evil. Paul the Apostle wrote to a community of people who were dealing with trouble and injustice that brought them sorrow and uncertainty in their lives. When evil seemed to be overwhelming the people in Ephesus, Paul wrote to remind them of a greater reality. In Ephesians chapter 3, beginning verse 14, Paul said this, "When I think of all this, I fall to my knees and pray to the Father, the creator of everything in heaven and on earth. I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resources, he will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Christ, though it is too great to fully understand," Paul said. "Then you'll be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God himself. Now all glory to God, who is able, through his mighty power at work within us to accomplish infinitely more than we might ask or think. Yes, today, tears flow and pain has come to us in our community. And some of us have learned that through times of pain and suffering, and it seems like our world is turned upside down and we have lost those who are closest to us. Love is greater than evil. People we love may be taken from us outwardly, but they can never be taken from us inwardly, because love is greater than evil. Paul prays for people in these verses that in times like this, only God can bring the peace and the comfort that we need. God will use people to bring hope to a family by an outpouring of a loving community and sending cards, notes, emails, prayers, scriptures, flowers, food, and so many other things, because love is greater than evil. One of the greatest resources God uses to help us overcome our pain and restore our joy is memories. So today I want to speak to the officers and all the law enforcement agencies here today. I want to salute you and say thank you for what you do to protect and serve. And I was thinking, as I was listening to all the stories and the memories that you have, when you meet a young, high-energy, new officer that thinks he can do everything that the police force, every job the police force has to offer, you'll think of Mike Wilson. When you hear a song on the radio, probably country, you'll probably think of Mike. When you get a call of domestic disturbance, you will think of Mike, who was willing to give his life to go into an uncertain situation to help someone in need. Because love is greater than evil. Mike never allowed the evil that law enforcement has to deal with so often to make him bitter or angry or cynical. I say that because I know firsthand the Wilsons are our neighbors, and many times I would turn off of my street and hurry up Mike's street, and I would all of a sudden look up and see a white patrol car sitting over on the left near the trees, and the first thing I would do is look at my speedometer and usually tap my brake. On one of those occasions, I was driving up Mike's street, and he was out in the yard with the kids, and he looked at me because I was going a little bit too fast, and he gave me the slow down sign. And along with that slow down sign was a big smile, because love is greater than evil. So many of our children that Mike worked with in our schools and in law enforcement in general were helped by his slow down gestures when they were sowing their wild oats of youth and were pushing the boundaries of the law. I was told that Mike was firm but fair. And I think of Mike, I wish all of the Charlotte County deputies that I have encountered would have given me a smile instead of a white piece of paper reminding me of my speed. Because at the end of it all, I'm just a minister. I'm not a saint. Love is greater than evil. I want to encourage this morning all of the pastors and the churches in our community to pray for our public servants and lift them up in prayer often. Joanne, when you go to the beach, you'll remember the first time you met Mike, who was on a jet ski. And when you got to know him, you wanted to devote your life to him, and you did. Let me say, Joanne, I have watched you this week deal with the shock of your loss and with all that was required of you to work through this process and all the arrangements you have made. You have amazed my wife and me with your strength and your courage. Let me say here today, I know Mike would be truly proud of you by the way you've honored him, your husband. Joanne, you will remember walking on the beach at times and Siesta Key, and Mike acted like he dropped something on the ground, and he got down on his knee and he asked Joanne to marry him. What a romantic he is. When you attend a wedding, you'll be reminded of the vows you both made to each other and to God to stay married through the good times and the hard times. Joanne told me that her and Mike had a strong commitment to family and to marriage. Love is greater than evil. To our community, when you see grandparents raising their teenage children, grandchildren, you'll be reminded of the bond of love that Mike had for his grandparents. And to the family, Brandon, Tyler, and Emily, when you see a camper, you'll be reminded of many weekends you spent with your dad and how much time he spent showing you his love and commitment to you. When you carry on some of your family traditions, you will think of the times when your dad wanted you to rub his feet and his back. And you didn't feel like doing it, so he would start to bribe you. He'd start with $1. He'd go up to $5 sometimes. And when you make family traditions of your own, like Mike's grandmother started when she rubbed his feet and his back as a child, you will do that same thing for your children. When you see a lawn care company, you'll be reminded of your dad's #1 priority, to work and provide for his family. I asked Joanne when we were talking about this, if you could describe your husband in one word, what would it be? She said, provider, because he worked tirelessly to provide for his family. Not only did Mike work as a police officer, as we've heard, he owned a lawn care business. And he called it lawn enforcement, for Pete's sake. So when we come to days like this and it seems like tragedy has taken place and everything is bad, Paul reminds us that faith in Jesus Christ will strengthen us on the inside. On Monday, Mike answered a call for someone in need. He was the first one there and was willing to give his life to help someone. Paul tells us in Ephesians, God sent his son Jesus into the world, a world filled with danger, a world filled with trouble, sin and death, and evil reigned. John 3:16 tells us, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him would not perish but have everlasting life. Jesus was the first God to answer the call to rescue us from sin and death, because love is greater than evil. No other God volunteered to do that. No other God was willing to give his Son to die on a cross for the sins of others and take our punishment. No wonder John Newton wrote those words of the great hymn of the church, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see." He went on to say, "Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come, but grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home." You see, God's grace is greater than our problems. It's higher than our fears. It's wider than our needs. Love said, "Whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved," because love is greater than evil. Mike believed in God and in Jesus Christ. And I was thinking in those final moments when he was wounded, he called for backup on his radio. And Mike had time to call for backup. I know he had time to call on God that he believed in, because love is greater than evil. I would like to close this morning in this service and in this celebration of Mike Wilson. And I'd like to pray for our community and pray for our law enforcement officers and agencies. And I'd like to pray for the Wilson family. If you would, just bow your head with me. Our Father, we come to this day and we realize that there are things in life that we do not understand. There is evil. There is life and there is death. But Lord, you have promised us in your word that love is greater than evil. That the love of God is higher and deeper and wider than anything in our lives. And I pray, Lord, for the law enforcement community. I pray, Lord, that these officers who deal with evil on a regular basis, I pray that you would protect them and keep your hand upon them and watch over them. But Lord, I also pray that you would help them to approach their mission and their work with this idea that love is greater than evil. Don't allow them to become cynical. Don't allow them to become jaded, because when they do, it harms not only themselves, but their families and their law enforcement agencies. Lord, I pray for our community that you would help us to understand in a fresh new way that you love us so much that you sent your Son as a first responder to our needs. And that need is a Savior. And we thank you for that today. And to Brandon, Tyler, and Emily, I pray, oh Lord, that somehow you would fill the void in their life. I pray that you would bless them and let them know and be thankful for the Father that they did have. So many don't ever get the opportunity to have a father give them in a headlock and kiss them all over. Lord, I pray for these children now, that you would just be with them and strengthen them. And lastly, Lord, I pray for Joanne. Ever since I heard about this situation with Mike, I started praying, God, give her strength. Let your Holy Spirit rest upon her. And Lord, let her be strengthened with might inside so that she could continue on and move forward with her family. And Lord, I thank you today for Mike Wilson and his wonderful example to all of us, his love and his grace that is demonstrated in the way he treated his fellow officers, comrades, and the way he treated his family. Now bless us today in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. God bless you today.
Thank you, Pastor Webb. Thank you to everyone who has spoke today and shared those kind words and remembrances. They're very much appreciated. As we conclude the services here inside today, let me remind you that Mike, once he joined the force, wasn't only a part of a career, he was part of an extended family, and that's shown with all the honors here today. But as Pastor Webb mentioned, it reminded me of a story that I heard one time that said this mom was putting this little boy to bed at night, and he wanted to leave his light on. And she said, "No, you'll be fine." And he said, "No, I'm scared." She says, "Well, God will be with you." And he says, "I need somebody with skin." Well, guess what? Over the next few months and weeks, family's going to need somebody with skin. Joanne, kids, I think they're all going to be wearing green uniforms. Okay? They're going to be there for you. But as we conclude inside, we're going to be dismissed in a coordinated manner. So if you will please remain seated until you are dismissed, it will make it a whole lot simpler. We will be having final honors on the north lawn out by the water. But at this time, if I could have the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office command staff please rise. Please exit to the rear doors and to the left. Thank you.